Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 13. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
My name's Liz Mordew, and I am the lead planning archaeologist for Northamptonshire, and I've been working in that role or a similar role for nearly 15 years. So what I and my colleague do is that we advise on planning applications and on other consultations, bodies like the Environment Agency, water and electricity companies, that kind of thing. And we also monitor archaeological fieldwork. So those consultations lead to fieldwork, and we make sure that that is done in the right way and to the appropriate national standards. So the object came from an excavation which I had recommended and was monitoring. And it was one of the earlier excavations in my time in Northamptonshire. It was quite near.
So part of what you do, therefore, is about protecting archaeological sites and objects such as the one you've got in the exhibition.
Yes, exactly. Obviously, the preference is always to preserve things. And if we can preserve the archaeology in the ground, that's the optimum. That's the best outcome for us. But the next alternative is what we call preservation by record. So that means that a site would be fully investigated, as much as possible is retrieved from it in terms of objects and in terms of environmental material, and then it's all analysed and then it's publicly accessible.
Tell me about the object that you've got here, because it has come out of the ground and we have it now in the exhibition.
We do, yes. It's a spoon made of pottery, essentially, a ceramic spoon, about the size of a dessert spoon or maybe a coffee scoop. My first thought when I first saw it was that looks like a coffee scoop. And it was found in a cremation burial, and the burial of a young person aged about 11 or 12. And it is an unusual find. When it first came up, we were very surprised. None of us had ever seen anything quite like it. And there are only, I think, 2 or 3 known in the British Isles.
Why is it so special? Surely a spoon is a spoon is a spoon.
It is, but usually, certainly in the prehistoric period, spoons would have been made of wood or horn or possibly bone. And bone ones might survive, but we rarely find them. We don't find wooden or horn spoons because they will decay in the ground most of the time. So to find a ceramic spoon is quite unusual. And as I say, there aren't very many of them known.
When you say ceramic, do you mean pottery?
Yes.
So this would have been fashioned, this would have been worked.
Yeah.
It would have been a prized item? Is it a utilitarian item?
I think it may be a little bit of both. I think it's obviously for us a spoon is very utilitarian. We use them every day, and undoubtedly spoons were being used in the Bronze Age every day as well. But the fact that it's gone in the burial, I think, makes it special. I think it connects it to the person who was buried there. Exactly what that connection is, obviously, we'll never know, but it does make it unusual.
Is it too speculative to say that with the burial, I think you said it was a young person that had been buried, would this have been something that perhaps, dare I say it, they ate their porridge with, or it was something they would have used rather than anybody else?
I think that's probably what it's about. Maybe it was their favourite and nobody else used it. Maybe it was one that they were fed with when they were ill. Something like that. I think it associates with them very closely, and I think that's why it's gone in with them.
So it is unique, as you say, or it's a very rare thing because It is ceramic, but also it is tied to a very personal use, and therefore there is an emotional connection to this.
I think so, yes. I think the people who are burying this young person have thought this is something that needs to be with them for whatever reason. This is something we can't carry on using ourselves. they need to have it. And that I think is why it's been buried with them.
In the modern day, we find ceramic spoons. Go to a Chinese restaurant, you'll find ceramic spoons.
Yeah.
Most of them are now metal. A lot of them are plastic. The materials side of this, what do we learn about communities when you have an item like this, which can be used in a very utilitarian sense, but what do we learn about our communities in the fact that is ceramic and it isn't metal, and clearly it isn't plastic?
Most likely, I think the thing to take away from it is that the community themselves are making these objects for themselves. This is very much that kind of subsistence economy at the time. You're very unlikely to be trading for something like this. The chances are somebody locally has found a decent source of clay, they're making pottery, they're making other things out of that clay, and amongst the things they're making will be the occasional spoon. So it's going to have been locally made. Which we can't say about most of our cutlery these days, I don't think. And that is, I think, an interesting point, and it's one to bear in mind, is, again, the personal aspect of it. It's entirely possible that the people who used it made it themselves.
Right, which leads me very neatly into my next question, which is, do we know anything about the family as a result of them owning something like this? Does this tell us anything about their standing in their local community, in their society?
It's quite hard to say because we have relatively little information from the site. There are 2 other burials which seem to be a little bit older but don't have any items with them. And there is a small post hole structure nearby which is of about the same date as the burial with the spoon. But the spoon is not the only item that was in the burial. There was also a small bronze object, which is an awl, which is for piercing holes in materials such as leather. And that's the only bronze object from the site. So it is just possible that the family are a little bit better off than perhaps the people who were buried there previously. Or it could just be that material objects are a little bit more common because it's a century or so later. But we don't really know that much about them because we don't know for certain where they were living. The post-hole building that we found doesn't seem to be a house. There's no domestic material with it, so we don't actually know where they lived.
What about the spoon itself and the way in which it has been made? Is it rough? Is it technologically of its time? How would you judge it? It's
quite sophisticated in some ways. It's nicely shaped. The surface is very well smoothed, and it has a little sort of stub of a handle that you might perhaps fit something maybe made out of animal bone over to make a proper longer handle, maybe wood. And it is, I think, quite well made. I don't think this is just kind of thrown together. I think this is somebody who's thought about it and done it quite carefully.
So there's an aesthetic to this then?
I think so, yes.
So yes. It was crafted. It wasn't just, I need something to eat my porridge with, so therefore I'm going to make something. And by the way, I'm going to make it look good.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is somebody who's thinking quite carefully about how they're creating these objects. It's not decorated. That's the only thing. We do there is one known from Hampshire which is decorated, but it's a much bigger spoon and is probably not for an individual to eat with. But this one is plain, it's simply smoothed surface.
Liz, you said this is the first time you'd seen an object like this when it came out of the ground. Does that give us an understanding of scarcity? Are there likely to be dozens of these things under the ground, hundreds of things under the ground, or is this a piece of unique pottery?
Well, I think because that we have dug so many Bronze Age cremations over the years in Britain, and yet this is only the second one to come out of a cremation in the United Kingdom, one in Ireland also out of a cremation. Where they've been found, other than that, they've been thrown away with the rubbish. So it's an unusual thing to find in a cremation, and we've got about 3, I think, from rubbish pits. So, yes, it's a very unusual object.
So what can we learn about Northamptonshire from this particular object, assuming that it was made in Northamptonshire rather than brought into Northamptonshire? And why should this be in the exhibition of 100 objects?
I think it's quite a sophisticated object to have at that period. It is unusual. The fact that we have one in a burial from Northamptonshire makes it that much more rare. And I think that does mark out a community in Northamptonshire as doing something slightly different at that period. It would be nice, obviously, to know much more about them, and maybe one day we'll find where they were living. But at the moment, I think that's sort of, for me, the importance of it is that it's so unusual, and we have it here in Northamptonshire.
It's a wonderful, perhaps mundane item, and yet it is not mundane at all. You say you've never seen one before. Your face is wreathed in grins as I say that. What is your emotional connection to it? What is your emotional reaction? Because that object is a direct connection to our ancestors.
Yeah. For me, it's the thought that probably a lot of people listening as well will think, well, I have a favourite spoon. I have a spoon I like to use for porridge, or a spoon I like to use for boiled eggs, or whatever. I have favourite spoons for specific things, and that is what it says to me. That's what sends the shiver down my spine. Maybe this was somebody's favourite spoon.
It has a fantastic connection to the ancient Northamptonshire, as indeed it does to the modern Northamptonshire as well. Liz, it's fascinating. I'm delighted that it's in the exhibition, and I know nothing about spoons, but thank you so much for telling me about it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.